the bottom, we've got structural problems with our technical workforce. They're just simply not sustainable by just keeping pumping in people into the bottom. It's just we're just going to wear ourselves out creating a qualified workforce. So we've got some real work to do in terms of the community, but I think they're solvable. They're not so broken that we need to do something radical.
Thanks, sir. Is there any questions from the forum, from here or in the remote locations?
Yeah, we'll
just by signal.
Just starting a new stream. We had to redo the stream, and so the outstations are just coming back in now. So I guess for engineers' visibility, who's actually online?
The outstations are popping in and out, so.
Yeah, we've had a little bit of IT issue at this end. Come on down.
Thank you. Hello, so it's Able Seaman Line here. I just have a question for you. You're saying that our AT, MT and ET streams are at critical. What's the plan to be able to work forth with getting our technical sailors trained up as quickly, efficiently as possible so that we can get those numbers out of the critical realms?
Yeah, it's a good question. Are you a techo yourself?
I am, sir. I'm a marine technician.
You're a marine technician, so you know full well that when you finish your time in the classroom at service, you end up with a journal under your arm, don't you?
Sure do, sir.
She doesn't have one anymore. She's just finished hers.
No, but what I guess what I'm saying is that I sort of have an expectation that there's two elements to that journal. One is that you need to have done a certain range of tasks to sign off the journal, but you also had to have time in the workforce to understand what is the importance of being a technician, and that only comes through time. It doesn't come. I can't sprinkle fairy dust over you and say you're now suddenly experienced. That doesn't work that way. So the really challenging thing for us as an engineering community is how do we bring people through with a level of experience without making them unsafe to themselves or their buddies or their shipmates as a technician. So we've got to find that compromise to say what is a reasonable amount of time for experience, but let's not hang on for too long, because if we wait for too long, then we'll have workforce problems. And that's that balance we've got to make, is that in our technical communities, we can't compromise experience just because we need more leading seamen. All right, it's a real balance we have to make. So there is no easy solution. It's just a matter of about getting people into and doing stuff.
Any more questions from the floor?
So, Commander Oakley, Fleetweo, your time in the role of H&E, what are your top 3 things you're really proud of?
Top 3 things I'm really proud of is H&E.
Yes, there is one up on the board that everybody can see at the moment, sir, and I'm not going to say what it is.
Is that the award?
Yes.
Look, I'll just talk a little bit about that award. A number of months ago, someone I worked with 10 years ago nominated me for that award, and when I was asked by the Engineers Australia if I was willing to be part of it, I was somewhat reluctant, because I am very, very conscious that I've achieved an award here that is reflective of my time as H&E, but you have all done the work. All this stuff I've talked about in terms of how we have recovered our Navy engineering credibility, reputation, and that video, not only our reputation but the reputation of the Navy, has been such a team effort. So I'm very conscious that I accepted that award on the back of a whole bunch of people's work, and I have just simply given the steerage to that. So I'll become more proud of it, I think, in time. Right now I'm a little bit humbled by it. But what's the things I'm most proud of? I'm really proud of our community as a whole. I think our people, I'll be a bit rough here, they kick ass. You know, the technicians and our engineers in the Navy, we actually kick ass. You know, we do so many good, positive things, and we seek no credit for it. And I often see this stuff, and I just get this real sense of achievement. That this is a group of people that I'm really proud to be part of, and really, really proud to have had an opportunity to lead, because you're all just such amazing people. I'm really proud of the engineering challenge. I mean, the engineering challenge is something that I probably didn't pay too much attention to before I could. But what I saw this year, particularly there was the the Electronics Technician Challenge, which was a little robotics challenge. You know, there are some incredible people. I met a leading seaman at one of them who I thought he's a future Seaway. You know, is that impressive? We just got to provide these people the field or the ground in which they can shine, and that's the sort of stuff that I take most pride out of. I'm pretty proud also that the marine technicians have been critical, but this year they're finally off the critical list. So I think myself and the two Seaways I've worked with have had something to do with that, and I think that's a really good outcome. So I reckon there's three things I'm pretty proud of.
Thanks, sir. Any more questions from the outstations over Signal?
We're not getting any. Either Signal's not signalling, or we're not getting any. Don't be afraid to ask. And we've got one coming out. We've got some dots happening. So yeah, it's been. I think I know talking to CN a lot. I think there's also been a realisation in our Navy, especially in our command culture, in the last, I'd say, in 2010, I think it was. I did the second Navy Leadership Development Program, and at that point, I really didn't think that was what the Navy wanted. And so I was already decided that I was in my last job, and then the whole leadership development program came about, and I thought, you know, if the Navy's genuinely committed to this, and we can get it into the junior sailor and junior officer curriculum, and we start to breed a style of leader that is in line with what that curriculum talks about, we're going to be in a much better shape. And I reckon in 10 years, the whole command culture in our Navy has changed entirely. You know, they're more respectful. They value that engineers bring to the table, and I think there's a much different command culture that sets us up really well for the future.
All right, sir. Thanks for your time. We've got more time if we get more questions. Otherwise, we'll probably break here and go for an afternoon tea, and we'll come back at.
So I heard Commodore Dad got questions right up to the cut-off date. Is that because he talked more?
I got cut off, sir. The director at the back was waving.
We can share. We've still got time, sir. If you want to bring some more, open the floor up for some broader questions.
We can do more questions with Commodore Dad while I'm online. Get some more questions for you, Carl.
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Hey?
I'm ready to go.
You don't really want me to ask any questions, do you?
I've got a front row that will help me, sir.
I saw that. You've got a whole bunch of people between you and me, and a couple of 100K.
I did have a question from the floor here, sir.
Yeah, that's look. I think.
Yeah, the question is, do you think that, are we hanging up again, right? Probably still in, I've probably still in line of Wi-Fi.
Good to go? Got a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good to go, sir.
Go ahead, Ross.
All right, is there a question? I dropped out a little bit there, so that whoever asked the question, can you ask it again?
Yeah, hi sir. I'm Lee Seaman, ET Lawson. Good to meet you. I just had a question. Last year, 2019, going to the NELF forums, a big focus was on retention, obviously with the introduction of the NRI, and that was a result of getting focused on because of the high burnout rates within the engineering community. I think undeniably there's been higher retention as a result of COVID, and I think that might have helped people, get more respite by having their replacements in place. Do you think that will carry over to 2021 or have a lasting good effect, or do you think it'll just be in 2020 and that'll be a good year as far as retention went?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the NRI was only ever an interim retention, so the NRI was intended to just buy us a couple of years of good retention while we rebuilt from the bottom up. I've said this to a lot of people, is the only way we regenerate our workforce is from the bottom up. I mean, the reality is we can bring a few people in laterally. Like we can get a few people from industry, we can get a few re-entries here and there, we can go to other services and bring people in, but in the main, they're really small numbers that do that, and they often feel niche capabilities. The way we really generate workforce in the Navy and in any military service is from the bottom up. We bring hundreds of people in at the bottom and we grow them. What we found ourselves in 2 years ago was the people who were there to supervise and mentor these young trainees were leaving the Navy. So we were actually looking at an absolute, a critical period where we could bring all these people in through recruit school and tech school and Creswell, but there'd be no one there to mentor and supervise them. So what we're trying to do is build a more sustainable workforce where there's less pressure to always be at sea, where people can, particularly techos, when you get posted ashore, it's proper shore time, it's respite, it's Monday to Friday, you're able to take leave, you look after the kids, you can start a family, all that sort of stuff, rather than fearing that any moment of any day you'll get a tap on the shoulder and get pulled out to fill a PDR. So it's about creating a workforce that is much more sustainable, and hopefully then people willingly stay because they feel they have a genuine choice. That's the point. That's the purpose. All right. So I think COVID has given us an extra opportunity to gather our thoughts, but the reality is that the Navy hasn't really skipped a beat through COVID, and our industry partners haven't skipped a beat either. So the sort of workplaces out there that demand technicians, particularly ex-Navy technicians, are just as busy as they ever were. So so we just need to be careful that it's not we're not sitting on a false retention argument right now. Okay, so. And as an ET, what type of ET are you?
LHD fire control, sir.
There you go. So you're one of the ones we can't afford to lose, can't you?
I like to think so.
I think so. Yeah. If there's ETSs, we're going to overload the system in the next couple of years with ETSs out of Cerberus, the tech training facility down there, because we've taken our eye off the ball in the last few years, and we're critically short of ETSs in all capabilities, particularly DDG. So we're going to flood the system full of seaman ETSs out of Cerberus. We need people there to teach them how to be sailors. So please don't go.
Thanks for your time, sir.
Hopefully that's convinced you to stay. It wasn't very authentic though, was it?
I'm inspired.
So, Commander Oakley, HMAS Hobart is actually online and streaming, and they send the junior sailors are interested in the current plan for the shortfall in technical sustainment and the potential loss of their reset and going straight from platform to platform.
Oh yeah, DDGs. Hey? Yeah, I agree. Now, hello HMAS Hobart. It's great to have you online. I feel the concern you have. One of the issues with DDG was we really didn't build up enough depth in the workforce early enough. Partly that is because when we stood up Sydney, I think it was, in Adelaide, they really struggled to get a commissioning crew together. So not only did we have no depth in the workforce, we struggled to actually get 3 shifts worth of crew together. So that is a real concern for them, and I don't have the answer for that until we build more people. So we need to create sailors in fleet support units that have ex-DDG time, that have had a bit of a reset phase, and then are ready to go back to sea either at a higher rank or in a different ship or something like that. And sometimes that just takes a little bit of time. Now I would say that's a real concern for the DDG sailors. So we just need to keep building. Need to keep building the workforce with the aegis qualifications. Suffering because we underinvested in the number of people going on those courses for 3 or 4 years. We didn't fill the number of spots that we had on the courses. Therefore, now we don't have enough sailors qualified in the Aegis systems to actually have that rotation of people happening. So it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy there, is that our lack of attention 3 or 4 years ago has now resulted in not enough people qualified on the systems. All we can do is now make sure going forward that we fill those courses and we give ourselves a bit of time to build that depth in the workforce. And it's the same problem we have in the patrol boat community. They have exactly the same challenge. There's marine MT sailors that come off the patrol boats in Darwin. They barely get their bag unpacked before they're tapped on the shoulder to do a PDR and they go back to sea. The whole purpose of building our Navy by an extra 5,000 people is to build sustainable workforces. But you don't just find an extra 5,000 people that want to join the Navy. That comes over a course of about 10 years that we grow. So we just have to build our way through this problem we've got right now. Because I think we're on a good trajectory. We just need to stay the course for a little while. Kidan, is that how you would answer that?
Absolutely, sir.
Yeah. There's no easy fix, is there?
No, it isn't. It's going to be time about growing that corporate knowledge, as you say, from the bottom up.
Bottom up, yeah. And partly that the NRI, we talked about the NRI, the Navy Retention Initiative is part of that solution. It's a short-term retention initiative to try and give ourselves a little bit of time to grow.
Hi, sir. Lieutenant Stibard Demio, HMAS Stewart. Thank you for your time today.
Hello.
Thinking back to when you were a lieutenant, what advice would you now give yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. I was a lieutenant a long time ago. You know what I give myself? When I was a lieutenant, I really, I won't say I suffered. I reckon I considered myself to be an introverted personality, like most engineers do, and I saw that as a character flaw. So I actually felt that being an introvert, being someone who's in the room listening, but not necessarily the most loudest voice in the room, I actually considered that to be a flaw, and that the Navy, that I was never going to succeed in the Navy unless I became more red, the circumplex, unless I became more red in the circumplex, that I would never really be successful in this Navy. And if I could go back and say to myself back then, I'd say, you're a fool. Because every good organisation needs those people, needs us as a group. And I talk to you all because there'll be the odd exception out there that might consider themselves to be an extrovert, and they are extroverts. They're the life of the party at the mess dinner. But in the main, our engineers, we are reflective, we are thoughtful, we see the world through the eyes of mathematics, and the techos are the same. The techos see the world through technology, and we all do. That is what we bring to the table, and we should be proud of that. And if you do that, but you also come out of your shell a bit and learn how to speak publicly, learn how to hold these sort of engagements, you'll be successful. It will just all come to you. And so just have the confidence that You can be who you want to be.
Thanks, sir.
That's what I'd give myself. And I'd also go back to myself and I would say, never take anything on face value. All right? Always challenge and probe. If something doesn't, you've got to work on your bullshit detector. If something doesn't sound right, keep at it. Don't let it go. And that's what I learned through that Seeking accident, is that there were warning signs in the year before that unfortunately we didn't probe hard enough. And I think back now and think, you know, if something doesn't sound right, don't let it go until you've prosecuted every bit that you think you need to go down.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Okay.
No, so Commander Oakley again, sorry. Question is, I guess for some mentoring guidance, there's going to be times when we as officers and sailors face circumstances where we go, you know what, I wish I did that a different way. Are there any times or any situations you can tell us where you felt like that and what you would have done differently?
Oh, there's many of them. Right? Look, some of the most challenging and I suppose times when I wish I had acted differently were when I was a young divisional officer. You know, some of those things that you have to deal with as a young officer are really hard. And I can still remember a couple of occasions where, you know, where I said things that I regret. You know, I remember I've never uttered the words since. I've never uttered the words, I know how you feel. Because I did that once, and the person I said it to said, how can you know how I feel? And his words ring in my head. I can never assume that I know how anybody feels about anything. I don't say those words to anybody because it's just not possible for me to understand how anyone feels about anything. The other thing is, you know, we talk about that the Seeking accident. I will forever live with regret for not doing things that I would do today, because I do believe that that was a completely avoidable accident. 9 people died in that accident, and there were warning signs that we should have gone after in the time before the accident, and I will forever live with regret that I didn't take positive action. I've come to accept that my actions didn't contribute to the incident. Like I don't feel accountable for what happened, but I do have regret that we didn't, when the signs were there, that we didn't take action, that we just didn't step in and intervene and make sure that that things were done that prevented that from happening. So, you know, that's something you just learn to live with. As you all get more senior, you will all come across circumstances where you think that you've done the right thing, and then maybe it turns out badly. I can only ever hope that none of you ever go through what we went through with that accident. It's not something I wish on anybody. So yeah, it's just a couple of those little things. I don't have too many regrets about what I've done in the Navy. I've been very fortunate. I've met a few very influential along the way that have helped me out, and that's always beneficial.
Thank you, sir.
No worries, mate.
There's no more questions.
Just got one question from South Australia. Gearing up towards looking at future technologies and how this will change our trade streams, leverage shipbuilding and future industries.
Oh, well, my answer to that is unmanned technology. I think the biggest challenge we face is how do we support unmanned technology? And that might introduce a whole new trade stream. We may have a blend between a marine technician, an electronics technician, and maybe even an aviation technician that is a single maintainer for a widget or a gadget that has to deploy. And that guy might go with a briefcase, and that guy or gal might end up on a ship with his briefcase and have to deploy. And they'll be the maintainer, operator, a whole range of things. I just think unmanned technology is the space that's going to really challenge us to break the paradigm that we've got now, where we're very systems and sub-specialisation stovepipes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Enjoy your afternoon tea, everyone. I'm really glad to have been part of it.
I'm sure Navy Canteens has put something on up there for you in Cairns as well, right? Right, Fleetweeder?
I'm sure I'll get a passes through somewhere.
All right. Thanks again, sir. We're back in 15 minutes. Conflict, please. Commodore Harris, who's here at Conflight, to talk to us about supporting technical departments, supporting operations. Little brief intro on yourself.
Okay.
Joined through ADFA in 1988. So 5 major commands, including the patrol boat, HMAS Melbourne.
Yep.
Command at Sea training, MHP, COM-MHP, and most recently Conflight. Thank you, sir. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Matt. It's going to be the perennial argument, I guess, that you all hear and I have used in the past, is that, you know, ships don't go to sea without the seaman officer, because, you know, we drive the ship and we do all the warfare stuff. But as I learnt on the most recent deployment, ships don't go to sea without the engineering departments of the Navy and the ship, because we rely heavily on the department to ensure that we can do our job at sea. So a very informal discussion today on and I'll probably use the most recent deployment that I did, and it was the first time Conflight was at sea since 2000 in command of an Australian Navy task group, which was fairly telling for me, the importance of the deployment to have Conflight at sea. One of the issues that we struck very early is that to go to sea for 116 days is very different to operating off the East Australian coast, out of Sydney, out of your home support base, where you can very quickly come back into port and get equipment fixed to succeed in whatever the mission is at sea, whether it be a workup or just a week's worth of training. Not so easy when you're deployed. From a people perspective, getting people home in the COVID environment, or getting parts sent to the various places that we could conduct logistics stops in. So the big thing that came to me in the first 2 weeks of the deployment en route to Darwin was that the task group was carrying a number of defects that I felt, because of the management regime we have in the ERDF process, which I kind of equate to a priority to get stuff fixed based on stores delivery, rather than what we needed to do was look on the mission context more, to have a look at the priorities of those ERDFs. So the important thing to me, and I was fortunate because I was in Canberra with Griff Elbridge, Griff understood, and he was the task group engineer for me. As I said, that I need all the COs and all the ships to go back and look at all of their defects. All the ERDFs from priority 3 upwards, the ones that are just TM200s, need to have a look at them with a different mission context, because the mission that we were going on was different to a normal mission that we're used to, where we go up through Southeast Asia, we conduct a number of port visits and engagements. There's no issues with port access, there's no issues with getting logistics to places. From the mission context that we were on, that we probably couldn't get commercial contracted flights to take stores up. They were going to have to come up by military air that we needed to bid for with the RAF. So the ships did that, and I think there were 9 ERDFs in the priority 2, priority 3 category that were upgraded to priority 1 because of a change in mission context. And that was the first point of the deployment, where the mindset of what we were going to do, how long we were going to be at sea, and how difficult it was to keep the task group in a seaworthy state was. Fortunately, because we did that work before we got to Darwin, then lots of stores come up, and I think there are over 300 stores demands because of changes in ERDFs that we put forward, and Ben would have seen it from down at Surfall. So that was a first change, not only in the engineering capacity of the task group, but for the whole task group. I said to the fleet commander, I don't think I can get by with one utility helicopter. I think I need another utility helicopter. He agreed, and before I knew it, there was a MH60 Romeo on a C-17 coming to Darwin to join the task group. So that was the importance that was put on store support to the task group. And I think the work that we did through the change in the mission context meant that the deployment then progressed much better engineering-wise and seaworthiness-wise, because we were able to put the greater focus that was needed because of the different mission context. And I'm sure Ben from Surfall would agree. It was challenging because of those reasons that I talked about. Getting stores into theatre was the primary driver. And then when you have two ships that suffer some major defects, that means that they're going to be delayed in getting to the major exercise. But because of the work that we'd done in preparing for the deployment, and we'd looked at the ways that we could support the ships, we were able to get contracted support up to Guam, fixed Arunta, and got Stuart into an acceptable state that she would be able to complete the deployment and get through to a docking in Perth. So it was a big effort, and I guess that's the thing with what the deployment was. It was me as a CTG have an understanding, and I've known Griff Elbridge for a long time. I relied on him a lot, provided me with all the information that I needed. I could talk to him about what I needed done from an engineering perspective to achieve the warfighting aims that I was directed to achieve on the deployment. So it proved that with a symbiotic relationship between the warfighter and the engineering community in the task group, being able to reach back into the engineering community back here in Fleet and down at Surfall, and I guess down in the Navy Technical Bureau as well. There would have been lots of stuff that I didn't get to see going back to Navy Office. It was that relationship and the support construct that we implemented, and I didn't get any pushback with a context change in the ERDEFs, which I was ready to argue the toss about, but no pushback. It was all support, and away we went, and that is a lot of the reason that the deployment was so successful. The other question I was asked to talk about, what is the required of the engineering community as an enabler of the capability in 2021 and beyond? It's a similar thing. So we've got the Fleet Warfighting Forum coming up early next year. I've got a fairly significant signal that I've provided to FC, and it's all about changing our mindset, and it's based around the deployment that was the 116 days. With the changes announced by the government in the Defence Strategic Update, days of going up through Southeast Asia, flying the flag, visiting ports every 3 days, getting ashore and having a great time, I think are not gone, but they will change, which requires us to change our mindset. We might do more days at sea, but again, that needs to change the mindset, not only from our people, from a resilience perspective, but from an engineering standpoint, where we may have carried defects before that we were quite happy to live with, and the CO, CTG, Fleet Commander were happy to live with until the ship got back home. But if we've got the opportunity to fix them before we go, then we should get them fixed, because who knows what's going to happen while we're deployed and we're away from Australia. So that's probably my big message, is that times have changed. We need to look at our equipment, our maintenance, in a different context and a different light. One of the great things about the deployment, a captive audience. I don't have the exact numbers with me, but I'm pretty sure that before the ships got to Hawaii, which was about 8 weeks into the deployment, within the 2 FFHs, the DDG, Canberra, although she'd come back to Australia, and in Sirius, they'd trained a force's worth of MSTs, MSMs, MSCs, FCOs. The number of OPQUALs were amazing, because everyone worked hard. We allowed delaying serials to occur to achieve the training. So the amount of training that was done OPQUALs-wise, not just in engineering but elsewhere, was fantastic. And I don't think from a maintenance perspective, the daily maintenance requirements ever got below being about 94% completed. So again, an indicator of why we had very little defects that stopped the deployment occurring. I have a sense that it may have also been because everything just kept running. When you don't shut stuff down and then start it back up, I'm not an engineer, but my car brakes when I go to start it up in the morning. So I think that had a lot to do with it. Well, we drove the equipment like we'd stole it, and it operated 24/7 for the entire deployment. So I'll stop it there. I hope that presents some ideas that some questions will come.
So, Warren Austin, I've got a quick one for you.
Yep.
Just on your op pulse. So, we're looking at the numbers at the moment, and our op pulse for the year was something like 180 MSTs down from supply and demand, what we need.
Yep.
So we're saying we're going away on deployment, we're doing it, but we need to be doing this across the Navy. And how are we looking at actually supporting that throughout the whole Navy rather than just that deploying?
I think I'd probably be talking out of turn because I don't write the FAS, but certainly my view that when my command and control elements, whether it be the Maritime Task Group or the Amphibious Task Group, when they're at sea in command of stuff, then one of their requirements from me is to get on with and allow op calls to happen. So I guess it's difficult. When you look at the FAS, the majority of activities that occur on the Australian station are work-up activities, they're squad activities, or they're an exercise of some description like the FCP, where it's difficult to program those times in. I mean, it's just if that's the requirement, then it's something we have to work out how to get it in the program. It's a question that's probably better asked or answered by both Comtrain and DG Mar, I guess. One owns a training organisation, the other one designs the FAS with input from Surf4 because they're the guys that are using the op calls. So, Cool.
Come on, Dave, DGN. They're all that.
For a little while.
For a little while. One important fact and point that you made was understanding context.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing, I suppose, in supporting the young engineers and young technicians, how do they work better with command to understand the context of the operation? Because as you said, that will start to shape what we need to do, what are the imperatives, as opposed to, oh, well, this is broken, I don't think it's bad, whatever.
Yeah.
So what would you encourage the younger engineers and technicians to start thinking about when we talk about context?
I guess it comes down to having an understanding of what the ship's going to be doing. One of the challenges I had was that although I'd been CTG for the ships that were on the deployment during the FCP, we then came back into Sydney. I was no longer the CTG of the 5 ships. They rolled into maintenance, and then I became CTG again on the day we sailed. So I wasn't able to educate or provide a direction to have the ship's COs educate the ship's companies, so it was left to their own devices. And I think that that's what it comes down to, is that when everyone seemed to, as we approached Darwin and we'd been at sea a little bit, I'd recorded a main broadcast that was sent to all the ships. It was the education and the understanding of what the task and the mission was that I think really drove it home. And one of the themes in the Fleet Warfighting Forum that, clearly from what we did on deployment, engineers are warfighters, and everyone should come along and listen to. It's going to be done by unit, get a DVD with pre-recorded presentations. Is one of the things is the shift of the mindset. So if you go into a deployment and with a certain mission or a task, with the mindset that I'm a warfighter, then you'll have the context and you'll be able to look at things differently. An example I liked using on the deployment, and I still like using, is as a warfare officer, go and do a gunnery serial, and we invariably 40 rounds, 8 bursts of 5 rounds or something, and it's all about getting records and making sure the system's accurate and works properly. You don't do a firing like that for real. You do a firing for real, you bracket the target, and then you pump the rate of fire up to max, and you get into it with rounds. When you do that, the barrel heats up, speed of the rounds reduces, and if you don't have a muzzle velocity indicator, you can't adjust the ballistics, so you start missing the target. So when we deployed and we get to Darwin, we had 2 ships that had broken MVMIs. I said, well, let's get them fixed. No, we can fix them when we get back. They're priority 3s. Well, no, all of the mission context. We need to change it. And so through the education process, an understanding of what the mission was what really started to change. And I think that's what will help everyone in the ship, not just the junior engineers.
I think the other thing too that you talked about, and it's a point, not a question, I guess, is understanding the context of a task group mentality as opposed to a singular ship, and what does that mean and what does that bring to bear? Because there's some absolute force multipliers being in a task group, and that's what they're there for, but also in the support of that end task through the engineering program.
Yeah, and that did occur. So for a long time after leaving Sydney, getting the task group mentality into the people in the task group was a continual battle. People would still leave the ship with an email and go and ask for information when within the task group we probably had the information. And Griff really took charge and was the central point, because we've got the ability to transfer capability within the task group if you just ask the question. Sirius broke some bolts on a Raspberry, and I think from memory Hobart had a 3D printer and we're going to be able to print some flanges or bolts or something, but we're going to get us through until we get to port. And it's stuff like that centrally in the task group is a big enabler.
On the ERDEF side of things, you mentioned context of mission. Sorry, yeah. So on the ERDEFs, I talk about from a previous life I come from, but the ERDEFs have a mission designator and a priority.
Yep.
I just think maybe it's time for us to revisit the way we report, and then that would focus us as we go to the battle-worthiness boards, because I think that's the key area where certainly battle-worthiness boards is more operational focused. I think engineers don't come to the party as much as they should do.
And it kind of fits with where I haven't been able to work it out yet, but a ship doesn't deploy unless it's at sea release serial 3, so it's at UR, but you can carry defects in serial 3 that still make you battle worthy. So it's somewhere in between that the ship needs to be out of the preparedness and a capability perspective. I don't know what it is, and I've seen it when I was COs of ships. If you don't make something a priority 1 because the stores delivery contract says you don't get the stores, you make it a priority 1, but stores are inbound, and it is a process that we need to look at reinvigorating or doing differently.
So Commander Oakley, Fleet WEO, Hobart is streaming at the moment, and they ask, with task groups over the past few years deploying without an LHD, is there plans in the works to have a task group engineer position embedded in MRTG and or fleet battle staff to fulfil the role instead of having to rely on ships engineers?
It's an interesting question. From a capability perspective, I would say yes, and it would be great. The problem we have is that if you don't deploy with an LHD, the bunks that are available in the DDG don't support the task group commander and his staff, which is why for the deployment when the task group command, when I transitioned from Canberra and went to Hobart, that's why the pusser in Hobart had to act as the N4 because I couldn't bring the N4, and why the doctor that was embarked in Hobart, whilst they were a task group asset, I couldn't bring the N06 from the task group staff, the commander dentist that I had. So we're constrained by bunks, which means that we then have to design the staff differently and leverage off the ships for some capability. I'd argue that it's a good training environment for a ship's engineer to step up and be my engineer for the task group, which then allows the deputy engineer to step up, holus bolus, do the ship's engineer job, and if there's a young AMEO that's capable, should be able to take on the majority of the role of the DMEO. So there's win-wins with the losses that we have because we don't have the DDG with us, if that makes sense.
So if so this year thrust a lot of sort of requirements on us that we probably weren't prepared for. In hindsight, any of the things that you took on as a result of that, would you choose to keep next year going forward?
The thing that I think I did that I would keep, and it's the utilisation of those two commander positions that are in the LHD, both as the task group logger and as the task group engineer. They simply by standing up at the commander's update brief and briefing the task group logistics and the task group engineering state allowed me to get a good understanding and appreciation of how we were materially, what we couldn't do, but also allowed me to adjust some priorities to ensure we were able to do the next part of the deployment. So I think having those two positions, because I don't think the task group engineer in the LHD had done that before.
So that was the fourth deployment of that sort of kind.
Yep.
I think the first one was the task group commander was the CEO of the LHD.
Yep.
And then we had the next two sort of embryonic setting it up with the first of the task group commanders as ATG being there.
Yep.
So we had trial, we had that sort of set up.
Yep.
But to see it in full action now is, I agree, I think it's great stuff.
Yeah, so they're probably two of the things that I'd maintain going forward. But bunks are going to be the challenge. Next year the FAS has got a two-ship, and a one-ship deployment over separated times where there won't be a task group staff. So it's going to be a challenge. We don't have the luxury of a command platform that is a dedicated command platform. We've got to make do with the bunks that are available on the various ships.
Any more questions? So I'd like to thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thanks, Matt.
Join me in thanking Conrad.
I hope that helped, and that's what you're after. Thanks.
Okay, on the home stretch now. As you can see, there's been a whole lot of stuff in terms of Navy and what we've done. As you know, in order for us to move forward, we need collaboration with everyone, and this includes CASG, and of course, a big player is the major surface ships. So, speaking on behalf of Commodore Elliott, we've got Mr. Paul Haskinen, who will be talking about the MS major surface ships. Thank you.
Hey folks, how you going this afternoon? I'll be a little formal and stand here at the lectern because I'm going to be reading some of this, to be honest. So obviously I'm not Commodore Elliott. I'm a bit of a ring-in, and whilst he's got 30 years plus of engineering knowledge and expertise, I'm flat out spelling it sometimes. So just keep it in mind. What I want to do is at a great rate of knots, give you a quick wrap of some of the major activities that have gone on this year, particularly in the major surface ships side of the world, and how that engineering knowledge and expertise across the fleet, across industry, across all players in making this work has been injected to make it a bit of a success. Right. Next slide, please. All right. I'll skip over this one, other than to note that it's a big part of the business. We've got about $1.2 billion a year annually going through the sustainment budget. About $900 million of that, or thereabouts, is the major surface ships cut. There's a lot of large capabilities that draw some cash to keep it all going. Now, it's probably been touched on already through the course of today, but I want to go back to the start of the year and talk about what I like to call the best sort of fire extinguisher you can get. Next slide, please. So, big events at the beginning of the year, but how did it all come together from a CASG and industry side, and what do we learn out of this process? So obviously, end of December 19, the fleet went into wrap, and in preparation for the high-risk weather season, we had HMS Choules as Hadar vessel. We also had Sycamore down as rescue and operational response vessel. Now both of these vessels were activated on New Year's Eve and sailed the next day to undertake their activities. For Choules, the key message here is it's really business as usual for a Hadar platform. For Choules, the majority of the maintenance is conducted mid-year, and most of it's conducted at 48 hours notice to move anyway. So it's something the ship and industry partner are quite comfortable and familiar with. For example, Choules, back when it was dealing with the aftermath of Cyclone Debbie, both AXPO, the SPO, and AMP as the industry partner were able to reconstitute that vessel and turn it around in the 48 hours whilst it was in the middle of a maintenance period. In addition, we've done some tweaks such as Choules' usage upkeep cycle, making sure that the vessel has its maintenance done as much as possible outside cyclone season, even to the extent of moving the class certification renewal period out to May to just give it that extra little bit of clearance. The other thing that was happening here was C3030 as a capability assurance project was brought into the SPO, and that meant a couple of extra things could be done, which paid dividends through the bushfire assist activity in terms of galley capability. All of this, of course, meant that Choules was pretty well placed to respond to any emergency. Also quickly touch on Adelaide, which was trigger very early in January to find out what its material state was. At that time, the ship's GT was unserviceable, but it was still able to operate on the 2 diesels. But given the mission and the requirement for power, obviously a big push to get the GT back online. So the SPO commenced work, early Friday morning with the contractors Shadbolt working on the ducting and GE working on the GT unit itself to get these things happening and set to work. And of course, the ship, the SPO, and industry were working on the trials package to make sure that it was all going to go okay, because this was the first time that the GT unit had ever been replaced in an LHD. Also working with Lloyds to make sure that conditions of class were covered and they were comfortable for the ship to proceed and sail if required. In any event, the ship was actually sailed on Saturday afternoon with the industry partners on board, who kept working and got things done in a fantastic way. So the GT was run up and set 24 hours ahead of schedule. Risk assessments were generated and of course passed through the SPO through the principal engineer to approve the load trials so that the ship could proceed into the area of operations. Not going to touch on Canberra, but it was obviously involved and wound up ready to go as well, given that it too was also in maintenance over that period. Next slide, please. I made reference before to C3030, which is code speak for Choules' capability assurance activity. And this was intended to increase the ship's supportability through to end of life. And normally these things are done as a big bang activity, sort of identified and targeted for a refit period, which in Choules' case would have been 2021. But the really good thing and the agile thing about bringing it into a SPO, getting industry involved as early as possible in the process, was that some of these things could be brought forward, and the galley and the galley deck were a great example here. And the outcome of this, of course, was a much improved galley for those who've seen it, certainly improvement over the original UK-centric design. Sorry, Aaron. The earlier installation, of course, rather than leaving it till 2021, which would have been the handy time frame, it also de-risks the work that we're yet to do next year, because there's less activity on board. It frees up some of those schedule pressures. Now, none of this could have happened without the close working relationship between the SPO, industry partners, but most importantly the ship, to make all of this happen in the time frame, and to allow the obvious end result through bushfire assist, where many thousands of meals were able to be delivered to evacuees. Next slide. That's great. The bushfires happened, but what have we learnt from it? The key message here is that it was a natural disaster and it was on television, but it's very much business as usual for a SPO in support of these sorts of Hadar activities. Now, preparing ships like Adelaide and Canberra for sea showed that the contracts we have and the processes, they're sound, but we could have had a clearer picture about the exact material state of a ship at any particular point in time, because when someone presses the button, our ability to understand what that means and target those key systems for readiness it does make the process a whole bunch easier. Also helps educate us. It's a small country and it's hard to do, but our industry partners, wherever possible, help them to broaden their technical support network and forge relationships with a number of suppliers, additional to their key ones, so that when the flexibility or the additional load is required on the system, it can be turned on. Lines of communications were an issue, of course. We had the issue of multiple agencies, both within and without defence, directly contacting various different people within the SPO and other organisations to try and get information. This resulted in information going out, but not necessarily in a controlled manner or a consistent manner. So that's definitely a learning to come for next time we face one of these collectively. Now, the success here in making sure that we hit all those preparedness goals highlights the significant efforts going way back to about 2011. My memory doesn't go back any further than that. But all of that work on ensuring the seaworthiness of the fleet, because being able to prioritise your repairs and make sure you've got your preparations ready for the ships to sea. It was all done against a backdrop of having an agreed, already practiced and well understood seaworthiness process to be able to do that, and then also to report on afterwards. And because I'm speaking with the CASG voice, I also have to say that industry plays a key part in this, and being able to make those relationships deeper, more genuine and broader will help not just what we in major surface ships or across Navy, but also broader defence has been striving to build in terms of that longer term relationship with industry. Next slide, please. And no, Conflot's already flagged this one, but from a CASG perspective, understanding the recent deployments, efforts in de-risking were obviously coming to the fore. And for example, in the case of Canberra, this took the form of deployable spares packages. Spending a lot of money, but money on the right things to do the right job. And this involved fairly heavy engineering analysis and system reliability analyses. On a range of different systems up on the screen there. You've got your ROs, your chill water plants, STPs obviously. But the outcome of this, and it's already been alluded to in terms of minimising the number of ERDFs that are going to be arising, but ensuring that if things do go wrong, that at least we're better placed to be able to support those vessels at a distance. Over to the next slide. This will bring a tear to Aaron's eye, or some nasty flashbacks, I'm not quite sure. Just wanted to put this graphic up here because it's a long time frame. Apologies for the size of the font, but across the top we're tracking month by month performances across 2020, and down the bottom we're tracking it across financial years, where the line is the total number of P2 ERDFs being carried by the LHDs, and the bars showing the number of ERDFs raised in those particular periods. What you can see, particularly from to the far right, where we've seen a really concerted drive and a drop in the number of P2s being carried. It doesn't happen by magic, but it's not just a case of good work happening right now, but it shows what can happen after a couple of years of owning and operating. I see Spike's in the audience too, he's lived this dream. Understanding and learn how it ticks, how to make it work better, what happens when you turn things on and off all the time, and what happens when you leave them running. Working closely with CASG, working with the group to make sure that we've got nice clear definitions about ERDFs and understanding what those mean. Thinking about things smarter, like bedding down a good solid usage upkeep cycle, which means if you find an ERDF, you've got a chance to fix it before the ship needs to go again. It shows the pattern of a number of years' work on maintenance documentation, not just making sure the documents support the right maintenance being done, but also being better at getting larger volumes of work done. And we've got Canberra in the dock at the moment, turning over about 17,000 person hours a week of maintenance work. And I can remember back 4 or 5 years ago, we'd be lucky to get maybe 7,000 a week out. Better at supporting these things. And as we get better supporting them and better understanding how they work, we get less breakages. We're hoping that the dip that we see, we can maintain that lower plateau until hopefully we can get to the next level and see what we can do afterwards. Next slide, and this will be the last LHD slide, I promise. It's just to give you an idea of the size and scale of what we're dealing with sometimes here. Now, Canberra's docking is significant, not just for a number of reasons. It's a resourcing perspective, from a financial perspective, number of person hours to be done, and the time invested over a number of years to make it work. It captures a number of firsts, and it's the first planned docking. It's the first 60 monthly cycle for a lot of these big bits of kit going through their planned maintenance cycle. And these investments that we make now and the harvesting of those learnings aren't just going to help for Adelaide next year, but it's going to help for decades to come, because we've got that deeper level of understanding that we're growing and cementing, and a better familiarity with the systems that give us the capability. As I said, that's enough big ships, and over on the next slide I'll start talking about DDGs that have had a big year, and it wasn't necessarily a pleasant start, because at the beginning of the year it was declared as a product of interest. That was in relation to a poor assessment of sustainment support maturity and the systems, performance of the contractors involved in supporting the capability, and as well as just a general feeling of frailty and fragility about how well this was going to be able to deliver the capability with the funding available. Having said that, the SPO moved straight into a couple of big activities, including the post-delivery upgrade. And doing these big things is never easy, but doing them in a COVID environment makes things even harder. And then throw in other additional but very valuable activities such as quality of life upgrades. And we've had a very busy year for these particular ships. Having said that, Sydney's been introduced into service. We've got Hobart deploying quite well. No P1s on that particular ship, I'm told. And some pretty pictures at the bottom showing what Brisbane looks like going into PDU, and some missile firings off RIMPAC. Over the next slide, DDG's done a couple of other things. Obviously, we've got the AMSDO status awarded for the DDG SPO, which is a fantastic thing to see from a ship that for a SPO that didn't have its AEO in place at the time. A lot of work was done to that as well. Also, we had in November, the work done on Brisbane's PDU was recognised by the Australian Institute of Project Management as New South Wales Project of the Year. Now, that's a fantastic accolade for showing how everyone works together, and this didn't go to the SPO, it didn't go to an industry partner, it went to the DDG SPO enterprise, and writ large I would fold Navy into that wholeheartedly. But it also is a good yardstick to demonstrate that maturity is coming in that support system. Very positive to see. So what's next over the slide? The next slide for DDGs. Obviously we've got sea squats coming up for Sydney. Doing that COVID environment, that'll be interesting. Maintenance periods left, right and centre, but these are business as usual. We're preparing for a future round of sustainment. What does future sustainment look like? Because these things will hopefully be steady state before too long. But also on the horizon, and more than just a twinkle in people's eye, is C4000 Phase 6, which will look to upgrade the Aegis system from about 2024 onwards. Last class of ship, I'm almost out of time, but I did want to touch on ANZACs because quality of life has been a big undertaking for the ANZAC ships. We've got 3 of them already, Ballarat, Toowoomba and Parramatta with the system installed, and we've got Warramunga and ANZAC with the system in train. ANZACs was interesting because they've shortened the period to be able to do this, but it's happening and happening relatively smoothly. What it does is it provides that quality of life upgrade and enhancement for the deployments coming up in 2021. And again, from a CASG and how that works for industry perspective, it's got those other knock-on benefits as well. You can get video linkages from ship to SPO and to repair agents to help support those defect rectifications activity, which is what Toowoomba did during the most recent ops. It certainly saves time, effort, hassle of needing to fly them to the Middle East to deliver the same support effect. Almost at the end. I just want to finish up here with the same sort of message that I was trying to stick to at the beginning, which is there's always a lot of colour and movement, but it's very much business as usual, and flexibility and agility is what we try and make sure that we can deliver to Navy from a CASG perspective. Now, Ballarat's scheduled IMAV needed a bit of a reprogram, and the amount of work that had to be done was condensed back down into an MWO instead. Again, support from industry partners and CASG made sure that we were looking at the critical systems and made sure that the necessary maintenance was still going to get done, and that the risks of not doing other things was very well understood. And then picking all of that up, thinking about how to reprogram that into the revised IMAV, which will be coming up soon. Outcome of this, of course, was positive for Ballarat, allowing it to complete those deployments and understanding of what work is to come in the new year. And in a similar sense, and Conflot's also mentioned this one as well, we had over on the next slide HMAS Stewart, who had some shafting problems that emerged. Now, this was initially scoped out as a 6-week body of work, but again, with some focus and understanding and commitment from the defence industry partners, we were able to get that work down to a 5-week period, as well as other work able to be done as well on the AGEs, again, trying to improve the seaworthy nature and reduce those future risks of using the ship as well. And just to complete the full story of the merry-go-round, of course, we had Stewart coming in and needing to get out of the water. That meant that we had to shift to Runter and got some work done up in Darwin at a distance, which was again an effective outcome. But again, I mention it not because it was good, bad, or indifferent, but because it shows that this agility is something that we do. We'll continue to do it. And it's a part of how we need to work more closely with Navy and our industry partners to continue doing so. Now, as I said, I'm not an engineer. Some of those acronyms, I put my hand on my heart and say I'm not quite sure what they necessarily mean, so don't ask me questions about those, but I'm happy to take any questions if you've got them.
Well,
yeah.
How responsive in this COVID environment was your industry partners in adopting procedures so they can still crack on and do work in travel restrictions and all those other things that the year thrust on us?
That was overall very good and very forward-leaning is how I would describe it. There are very few instances I'm aware of where an industry partner, for example, didn't want to travel to Australia from offshore or didn't want to complete activities. The other thing I'd say is that it wasn't a case of the ship comes up with some controls and KSG comes up with some controls and a SPO decides to do something different, and whichever industry partner was the lead for that ship did different things to its subcontractors. All of this was discussed and smoothed in a collegiate kind of atmosphere so that everyone understood what requirements needed to be in place, and not just a case of enforcing them but educating them at the same time, so that in very early days people were still thinking, oh, do masks make a difference? Does it give you a temperature? Spin forward to a number of months later and we have a much greater understanding about the threat represented by COVID and how best to manage it, as well as increasing familiarity from everyone. We've all been to the local shops, I'm sure, or been to the local doctor where a quick temperature check is just routine. So I guess it's a long way around of saying industry has been responsive, they've been generally forward-leaning, and the efforts have been made to make sure that when we approach something in terms of managing those COVID risks, it's done in as homogeneous a way as possible.
Just got a question from Hobart, and it's in the lean SPO construct, how can we best keep our contracted industry partners accountable in order to achieve capability milestones in the medium term?
Wow, that's a good question. I wish I knew the answer to it. Lean SPOs seem to be here to stay, and the focus of what a SPO does has subtly shifted, of course, from being the doer to being the assurer of someone else doing the doing. Now, in terms of how we get better at that, there's a number of different strategies, but in this sort of environment, the one I'd like to flag most importantly is the ability to make sure that key people progressing through their career life cycle get an opportunity to work within SPOs and have a chance to experience how to work closely with the industry, understand their drivers, and have the ability to influence to the contractors the importance of everything they do at the pointy end of the activity. So spending time is helpful. The enforcement or working with contractors to make sure that what's contracted is delivered is an educated piece. It's not always just written down in the contract, and I'm a lawyer by training, don't hold that against me, but the answer is not always to just pull the contract out and hit someone with it. It's to sit them down and work on the relationship that sits next to that contract. a combination of familiarity with how the system works and how different parties in making these enterprises tick is helpful, but also understanding where those levers are, and that the contract is not always the right lever to pull.
Just quickly, from Canberra, from Commander Middleton, it's more a statement in terms of a question, and it was really an example of good linkage between acquisition in Canberra and fleet. And this was for C3030 TAC 2, where the galley was in 2019 refitted. But it was a good example of user consultation from the RAN chefs to shape the design, building commonality, and then logically transferring the rollout with our close colleagues at LHD, ACS SPO, and industry to develop a well overdue upgrade that enabled the subsequent activities.
Yeah, I'd agree, and I was on board about the middle of last year and got shown around the galley, and the pride in which the ship staff were showing me in terms of this bit of kit and that bit of kit, as well as knowing what it used to look like and not being able to afford the upgrades we would have loved to have done back in about 2016. It was fantastic to see it come to fruition.
Paul, Rachel Durbin. Which of the really great initiatives that that have been driven by all sorts of things this year would you consider or would be being considered to be implemented across different classes, or to stay because of the complete shift in the strategic environment? So what are we learning to or thinking about rolling out as a permanent improvement?
Permanent improvements, I think the experience of COVID and understanding how fragile our supply chains are and how shallow our support base is, either from industry or from within Navy itself. The learning that's probably going to come out of that is paying a lot more attention to those supply chains, and I'm aware of a number of different activities, not just happening in individual SPOs, but across Navy, using those sorts of, tapping the dark web and understanding what things really cost and who's really got the parts, all the way through to, as I said, with I think it was LHDs, fostering a greater understanding of that subcontractor layer, and that'll be it's not just the right thing to do, it'll also be forced upon us with Australian industry capability becoming an ever more important part of the landscape. It's understanding our ability to help our direct industry partners harvest all of the smarts that are out there within that next tier down of Australian industry, not because it gives us the right answer or because it might be cheaper or because, from a nationalistic perspective it's the right thing to do, because it reduces the risk to the capability.
Paul,
Any
thanks
more?
very much for your time
That's
this
well,
afternoon. Much
thanks, Rich.
appreciated.
I feel underdressed against you guys, but this is good.
All right, good afternoon. Thank you for staying the course through a couple of minor technical difficulties, which, to be perfectly honest, I was kind of expecting a couple, but I was hoping we wouldn't have them. I'm here to wrap up this afternoon and what's been a very full program. We've heard from a lot of different people. In the morning we explored the benefits of technical outplacements and a real-life example of how upskilling benefits capability. We heard about some suggestions about bringing our communities together and employing our engineers. We almost had an update from MPC May that we got a little bit later. And TA Engine reflected on what work has been going on to develop our people. I mentioned this morning the topic of the forum was enable. So as a good engineer, I went and looked up what that means in the dictionary. And it says to make some, I'm old school, I had to use a dictionary.
I'm just using technology, Matt.
Yeah. To make something possible. Seems pretty simple, and that engineering makes capability possible. But how do we do it? So we heard from FSU and TA-Eng about the work that's been going in developing our people. And I expect that you know the answer, that most of it is about how we grow people, grow, develop, enhance, upskill. And you heard from Paul on behalf of DGMSS on how we sustain our platforms and ships. And this has been an extraordinary effort across the whole support system, not just those in uniform, industry, CASG, APS, everyone. And you heard from Conflight about how we had to do some of that this year with limited logistics support, long periods at sea, lots of challenges, but I think we've learnt a lot of good lessons that we can take forward into next year. We also heard from H&E and DG-Eng on the strategic importance of what we do to deliver capability for government. That's an effort on the framework and the processes that enables every member of the community to identify the work that they do, how it contributes to the government aims. So why did I draw together development of people, sustainment of assets, and engineering strategy? To illustrate what the community enables. Because most of us are about to proceed on Christmas leave. You're all going to go home to your families and you're going to sit around the table and your family's going to ask you, what did you do this year? And rather than saying, well, I fixed stuff, I might suggest you might use the words, you enabled naval capability. So before I close the forum, I'd like to take an opportunity to thank 3 senior officers for their service to our community. Rear Admiral Lawrence, who may or may not still be on the line, Commodore Dagg, who's with us, and Commodore Elliott, who couldn't be here today. All 3 of these senior engineers will shortly move along. And not only have they been exemplar engineers, but they have been advocates of the community of which we are part. So I'd like to thank them for their service over many, many years. Lastly, I'd like to thank my staff and our IS people for the assistance they've provided today, and the facilitators in all of our locations around the country and at sea. I think it's been moderately successful. I'd like to get some feedback into our team for what we can do for next year's forum, and also the material that you've all processed today will all be available on the DPN site shortly. Thank you, that's all I have from me. This is Sydney out. I'd like to get the crew here to hop up for a photo with good Commodore. We'll do that before we leave. All right, thank you very much, team. Do you want this backdrop or the...